exclusive, first ever, valued up.
What is up, everybody? Welcome, tuning into the Valued Up podcast. Here we are, episode 3. I can't even believe it, man. Where's the time gone? Here we are about to record episode 3.
Crazy.
What has been your experience up to this point? I know I ask that every episode, but here we have three episodes deep, man.
And it's been amazing. I love seeing how episode 1 played out because my expectations were absolutely zero. I mean, that was sidebar conversations like, dude, if one person watches it and it's us, like, I'm cool with it. Like, my expectations were so low, and we got subscribers, we got people watching, we got people reaching out to us on social media
already,
in person. You know, we go to the gym and people are like, oh, dude, saw your podcast. Like, that means so much to us because y'all don't have to do that. People don't have to watch or to tune in or support us, and with our expectation of it just being us in the beginning,
exactly,
and carrying ourselves, carrying our motivation, carrying our discipline, and having y'all come in and love on us, we greatly appreciate it because that edifies us. It makes us feel valued because of the value that we're bringing in. So it's been so cool, man. And we just take it one day at a time, wear whatever hat we need to wear in terms of building a pod, in terms of building a business alongside the pod, perfecting content creation, if that's even a thing, perfecting that. But it's been a journey.
Oh, man, the journey never stops, dude. And that's what's so exciting when you actually have a purpose in your life and you wake up every day. The moment that you wake up and you're like, man, we're chasing our dreams. We're actually going after something. And for us, casting that dream so big, and it's not even the end result of the dream for us, it's the value that we want to add, it's the journey, but more so it's the revolution that we want to create. It's a whole community of the personal growth of we just want to run with like-minded people, man. You know what I mean?
And that's why we created Valued Up. That's why we created Valueship Consulting Group, because we know what people are lacking, because we lack those things from the experiences that we've had in our lives, from leadership, from lack of leadership, from lack of people in our corner or management or whatever it may be. I don't know if you want to talk about Valueship as a whole and what we're stepping into with that, or where you
man. I mean, we can dive right into that. I mean, obviously, here's the podcast. We have Valued Up Podcast, and that's why we live in such exciting times right now, is because we have so many things that we are rolling out right now. We have the podcast, getting this in place so that we can bring people along the journey with us. But our big baby right now is the Valueship Consulting Group, which is a leadership firm that we're building off the ground. It's just us two right now. But our vision that we have is to have just a full-blown, like I said, revolution. Not even just a community, but a revolution. Because the marketplace that we see, the gaps in the world that we see at play when it comes to leadership, when it comes to organizations, when it comes to corporations, I mean, day-to-day lives, there's a leadership gap out there that needs filling.
Yeah.
And that's what we got together, and we're like, dude, we've had so much experience within our lives.
10 plus years.
Yeah, being athletes. I mean, how many teams have we been a part of where the epitome of athleticism is not the skill set, but the leadership that surrounds it, right? The processes, the systems of getting better.
Teams, corporate America,
military. And that's what I was going to get into outside of athleticism. Yeah. That was our growing up, right? And then we jumped into the military. How much experience do we have being a part of the military? I mean, we were both intel analysts, talking about that a little bit in episode 2, counterterrorism, you know, having just the largest leaders in our back pocket in the whole organization, going after the mission set that we were looking to accomplish, the mission set that we were actually a part of. Dude, we have so much experience under our belt. And what really changed my life is a book that I read just a handful of months ago. And so many people, when they're starting brand new things, it's like, how am I ever going to become successful? Or what value can I actually add to the marketplace? Like, what can I actually bring to the table? And that book said, no, man, what your starting point is, it's not zero. Your starting point is your own experience. And I feel like up until this point, we do you know, in the grand scheme of things, we might seem young at this point. I'm 34, you know what I mean? But we have so much experience under our belt. I truly believe we can add value to people out there.
Well, it's not even an age thing, and we've had conversations about this. It's not an age thing. It's about the amount of experiences that you've had within your age, right? The more experiences you have allows you the ability to have more wisdom on that specific niche that you're in, right? If you're into fitness, right? If you've been lifting since you're 12 years old and now you're 34, well, how many years of experience do you have perfecting and tweaking and learning and growing? It's no different than what we've had in the leadership world of having good leaders, bad leaders, being a good leader, being a bad leader, exactly. Learning how to lead, right? Learning the difference between leadership and management. And we've had so many different experiences because we were go-getters. And I'm so grateful for that because we were ambitious in our earlier lives that allowed us to gain more experience being a leader, right? And I think being a good leader, you first have to be a good follower. And we were there at that point in time too, right? Leadership is in a position. It has nothing to do with that. In fact,
it's a mindset. I truly believe leadership is a mindset.
Yeah, extreme ownership. That's what leadership is. Right?
Exactly.
Regardless of position. So
yeah, and that's what I'm so grateful which the military brought us is like you were talking about there. Where does experience stem from? Well, experience, the more that you go through, the more different type of situations that you put yourself in, the more experiences you're going to have. And that's what I loved about serving in the military. I ultimately did 10 years myself, but that 10 years, man, you know, we had multiple bases. We had multiple different trainings that we went to all across the nation. And so it forced us. It wasn't like we worked one job, one career for 10 years doing the same exact thing over and over. So our scope was very limited. Within the Air Force, it forced us to broaden our scope. You know, when I initially joined the Air Force, I was doing counterterrorism to a certain extent, but as an intel analyst, I was doing strategic operations. So we were doing case studies with whole countries. We were looking at different countries' leaders, what dictatorship looked like, you know, from such a broad, big level. I was working with psychologists in the military, really trying to break down how do these countries tick as a whole? What does our adversaries actually look like? And then got stationed where you were stationed. That's where we actually met in Las Vegas. And then the overall mission set was so specific. Counterterrorism, going after the number one bad guys and all over the world, you know what I mean? And so it came from such a broad scope to a soda straw. Yeah. And so my whole mindset, my whole skill set that I had developed up into that point completely flipped on its head. And I had to grow within the new role. And every time I turned around, it felt like every time we got comfortable and I developed a certain skill set, we got put in a different position. Right. And that's why I feel sitting here at this table today, that is the sole reason why we have so much experience. And you can take the fundamental principles that we learned from these experiences in everyday life. And then you get hungry for that, man. Yeah. I hate being stagnant. I hate having a ceiling over my head. And so you have to learn how to put yourself in uncomfortable situations. Yeah. And then not just to grow a different skill set in a new situation, but that's what enables you to grow your tool bag. You know what I mean? That's what enables you to put the more experiences that you go through, the more tools that you're going to have for your tool belt, the more people that you can ultimately relate to, which is the key to anything. You know what I mean? Leadership is influence. So the more that you go through, the more you can relate to a grand scale of people, the more that you can have the influence, which is, you know, phenomenal in my opinion.
Absolutely. So let's go back to valueship and why we decided to go in the direction of leadership in management. Yeah, we've had a lot of great experiences with being a leader or being a follower even, but what was that pivot point for us to be like, hey, this is why we're going to go into this marketplace. This is our blue ocean.
This is our marketplace. And, you know, for me, I've always loved leadership as a whole. I've loved the psychology behind it. I loved the mindset behind what leadership actually means, the relationships, because I think the foundation of true leadership is relational. Yeah. It's all about relationships, man. You know what I mean? And how you interact with different people, how you can use different mindsets in different situations organization. So just leadership as a whole is so broad, but there's so much layers when it comes to it. And I love diving into all of it. It's exactly like an onion. Just when you hit a new layer, you get to peel that onion back and it goes deeper. It's like a rabbit hole that never ends.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? You can spend so much time perfecting your craft, but it goes so deep that the growth that comes from it is unstoppable. And that's what fascinated me ever since the beginning, going back to, like I said, the athletics, going back to the military, just every single day life. I'm like, this is what I want to do with the rest of my life, is really dive into leadership. And so it's like, what is one of the key markets out there that has the biggest leadership gaps? And we see it all over the place. And really what it stems from is one of the largest leadership gaps right now. And I'm sure so many people viewing in can attest to this. It's between the frontline employees and new supervisory roles and middle management. There's such a large leadership gap right there, because I feel like we live in society today where leadership is kind of put on the back burner, where specifically for organizations or corporations, it's like the number one bottom line. What's the bottom line? It's make money, it's pad the pockets of investors, and we lose the art of what ultimately gets there. It's like we lose the art of leadership capabilities. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, just show up, do your job, do your 9 to 5, whatever your role is. That's all we care about, because we need to get to that bottom line.
Right.
And so we live in an era today where there's so much discontentment for people, right? People show up to their work, they're not satisfied because they're not getting fed.
Yeah.
And that's where we saw, hey, there's a large problem set out there. I talked to so many people. I mean, getting out of the military, we worked like 4 different jobs, coming to Texas, got a taste of the corporate life. We've worked like 4 different experiences. And the number one problem was relevant within all of those different industries. We were in insurance, we were in the aerospace community, industrial security, but the bottom line and the commonality between all the different industries was the lack of leadership between frontline employees and middle management, and what that looks like.
And it's so funny too, because it's like, well, I don't care about leadership, right? Like somebody maybe tuning in, like, I don't care about leadership, but leadership affects everything. If it affects your quality of life, right? Like, even if you're just that person that just wants to go, show up, and just straight up job it. Like, I'm just clocking in, I'm gonna do my job good enough to where I don't get fired, and I'm not gonna do anything more or less, right? Why that matters to you is because it affects your quality of life, right? If when you have a bad leader, a bad manager, you go home and you walk into your house and the kids get on you and like, dad.
Yes.
And your wife's like, hey, honey, how was work today? And you're like, right? Just that daunting feeling post-work affects how you go and you treat the relationships that are at home. Or maybe you're a single person, how you approach the rest of your actual life, right? Like, what you do to make money affects everything else, whether it's your paycheck, but more importantly, who you're spending your time with. And we've been affected in positive ways, and we've been affected more times than not, unfortunately. And I think a lot of people can relate to bad times, right? Bad leaders. And so that's why we feel like there's such a huge market, because no matter what business it is, or what organization it is, or what team it is, there's always people involved in that, and people are a conundrum, and we're here to solve that conundrum because we understand the relationship aspect of leaders, because we ultimately want to create a higher quality of life for those frontline employees, and we want to make life more enjoyable for those managers, for those leaders, to where they have a kick-ass team, for a lack of a better term.
Yeah, exactly. Not just having a kick-ass team, but like you said earlier, the quality of life. I think the number one term that gets thrown around so much these days is toxicity. It's a toxic work environment. It's a toxic relationship. That's a toxic person. You know what I mean? And I think all of this stems from lack of leadership. And that's why you wake up kind of despising the fact that, I have to go to my job today, or am I really going to do this for the rest of my life? Because that environment as a whole, there's a giant lack. And we say this coming from a position of we've lived it. And that's why we're kind of tired, man. Our tiredness, our frustration led us to this point. Instead of just enduring this for the rest of our life, it's like, okay, let's step outside of the box.
Right.
Let's take a step back, and let's provide the solution.
Yeah. Entrepreneurs get paid to solve problems.
And this is a large problem set that we truly feel like we can provide a value within this problem set.
Right. Absolutely. One of my personal experiences, I remember just being in the military, especially towards the end of my career, I remember having a horrible section chief. And the thing about the military is you can't quit. You can't go to another unit. You have to endure that for as long as you have orders. And I remember how much that affected me in a negative way, even being a NCO, a non-commissioned officer, being in a managerial position, but I still had such a limited scope to actually make a difference because I was on the enlisted side. And I remember just being bogged down. I remember how my leader made me feel and how I felt like my back was always up against the wall. And, you know, it's really unfortunate because the military has one of the highest suicide rates for any job. And I remember thinking to myself, I understand why people, you know, just feel trapped and unfortunately make that, you know, final decision for themselves, because I was never at that point, but I understood where they were at because they did feel trapped and my voice wasn't heard. Nobody was in my back corner, even though my intentions were pure to actually make that situation better. And I always remember that. I won't forget that because as a leader, I like to put myself in other people's shoes. I like to have that empathy because I've been there, I've done that, and I think that provides me being like a more holistic leader. But that's why you got to keep on going. You take the bad experiences to identify, hey, this is not who I want to be when I am in that situation, but it grows you in the moment. But also taking the good from those situations and you allow it to propel yourself forward. So that was one of the biggest things for me that really just helped me like want to focus on leadership. It left that chip on my shoulder of like, man, I know some people that didn't even make it out of that situation.
Exactly, man.
Right. And that, you know, as somber as that may be, or as, you know, almost depressing as that may be, that's real life, right?
It's like, real life.
That's why I talk about the quality of life, because we're dealing with people's lives, and life is something that isn't fickle. And so we feel such an intense responsibility with Value Ship Consulting Group and going in, whether it's military, non-military, private industry, whatever that organization is, we're there to fill that gap because we've been there, you know, and we feel so passionate and intense about that. And I'm just so excited to get in front of people and, you know, teach those courses and literally impact people and, you know, get that feedback months beyond, years beyond, like, man, you really came in and you helped change my experience. That's why we do what we do.
Exactly. And that's exactly why it's not just us sitting at this table. That's why we say we want a community. That's why I say this is actually a revolution, man, because we want to make change. This is not about an entrepreneurial opportunity where we're after creating wealth and we're padding our pockets and putting money and putting quick courses out there.
Fame is not what we're looking for.
No, we're looking for actual change, man.
Right.
But somebody has to step up. Somebody has to fill those gaps. Somebody has to be the pinch point that says, hey, let's set the tone. Let's set the direction. Yeah. Let's be the change.
If it's up to me, it's going to be me.
It's going to be me. And so that's why we have such a yearning to turn on the camera, to talk about these principles, to show you what this journey actually looks like, so that we can provide the value, so that we can start within our own communities, right? Like having this podcast here, we are in a living room, but it starts with our own thoughts. It starts with our living room here in this, you know, opportunity with the podcast. Then it goes into our communities. Then it goes into our state. Then it goes into the country. Then it goes into the world. And that's how change happens with any endeavor. You know what I mean? And you have to start with that big vision. Yeah. You cannot limit yourself when you're actually wanting to make change. And so we saw this problem set over and over, whether it was military, different industries, it all fell back to the same thing, was leaders today are not adequately trained on fundamental principles. We are not set up for success, man. No. You know what I mean? And that pitfall lies everywhere. We live in such a fast society today. Make money, get famous, make money, get famous, make money, get famous. And that, everything in between is kind of lost.
Yeah, just build the business, throw people in it, slap this together. Yes. Right. And then let's just worry about the bottom line, which is the dollars.
Right? And people stepped away from looking at the true investments, which is investing into their people, which is kind of back asswards in my honest opinion.
Because I think you said that wrong.
Yeah, I know, right? But looking at that from a soda straw from the inside looking out, it's like, nah, man, the reason why it's backwards is because if we make these initial investments, if we invest into our people, if we adequately train people, groom them, bring them with us, all organizations will be healthy, which will produce and increase the end result. But it's like we live in a world today where that gets put on the back burner, and we wonder why there's a toxic culture. We wonder why nobody wants 9-to-5s these days. We wonder why there's so many disgruntled employees, but nobody wants to actually look in the mirror and understand what the foundation of that stems from. And it's like, no, man, let's create a new norm. Let's get back to where people are the number one asset. Yeah. And that's exactly what's fallen to the wayside, is understanding that people and commodities is the number one asset. And if you take the time in our busy schedules, we can still do our jobs. We can still be a part of the cog in the ultimate industry that we're after, create the end result. But it starts from taking a step back from that, investing in the people, and then everybody will happily get to where they ultimately want to go.
Yeah, it's so funny because you said, it's bass backwards, right? Putting that investment into people rather than, hey, let's just throw them in and then let's worry about that on the back end. Let's see if they actually stick. And I think the biggest barrier people would say to that is like, well, Ryan, I don't have time. I'm in the middle of building something. But it's so funny because like, no, you don't understand. You can't afford to not invest because you're going to be spending so much time on the back end trying to plug up the holes, right? If you picture a dam, right? Like you're trying to build a business or trying to build a team and you just throw cement together, right, on that dam. Well, guess what? There's going to be holes and that water's going to start to pop through. And then you're going to be spending all your time trying to patch up those holes. And now you're not even building your business. Now you're not even growing because you didn't spend enough time on the front end to actually do what you needed to do with your people to actually go and actually retain that water behind that wall.
Exactly. And what that looks like is, if you're talking about the dam, people are trying to patch those holes with Band-Aids, man. And I mean literal Band-Aids.
Damn.
A whole ass dam. And you're trying to plug and fill the holes with Band-Aids instead of resurrecting the actual problem, flipping on its head, and going to the actual source, which is people and relationships, and doing right by the people first. Man, if you have one leader, that could literally change the whole outscope of the entire organization, because they know what it actually looks like, what the end result can come from taking the time on the front end to groom our people, to set them up for success, to invest in people so much, you're investing in your replacement. And you don't have to worry about the fact of, oh, I can't invest in this people because job security, right? I don't want to invest in people so much where I have to look over my back like they're going to replace me. It's like, nah, that's actually how you elevate. But people don't look like it.
Well, it's so funny because when you invest into the relationship, right, like you get that buy-in factor, that respect, that care from the person that you're elevating and building up to where they're not looking to take your job, right? Because it is so competitive. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there. But if you pour into that relationship and have that buy-in, they respect you for that because you built them up, and they're not gunning after your job. And in fact, they're edifying you to your leaders to where you're going to be, potentially that next person up for that promotion or to continue climbing that ladder.
Yeah, because the biggest scope and what you're measured upon, the true mark of a leader is not how good you are, it's how good your team is.
Right.
And if your team is performing well, it's like, well, this person must be doing something right. We need to get him in a more elevated, or him or her in a more elevated role because of that. So if you invest in your people so much where you've now created 4 people that can easily replace your job, it's not the fact that I'm going to be out of a job. It's the fact of leadership, or higher level leadership, is now looking at you like, oh, we need to elevate this person ASAP. If they did this with 3 people, what can they do with 10 people? What can they do with 50 people? And that's ultimately how you climb. And the fact of the matter is, if you produce a high quality on the front end with your people and that is not seen, well, it's time to go elsewhere. You know what I mean? Because that is a true toxic environment. If you're putting in the time, if you're making the true investment and you're actually producing fruit and it's going nowhere, don't be afraid to be bold and go elsewhere, man. You don't have to be trapped in a society within those cultures that has that lack. And that's why we ultimately decided to step out and not go to another organization, but be the leaders that actually provide the solution to so many of these problems.
Right.
So what I would love to hear real quick is you were talking about, the leader that you had in your beginning phases of the military and what, why they didn't show up and how it created everything. But talk a little bit about, let's dive into that, man. What were the biggest pitfalls that you saw? Like, why did you not feel validated? Why did they not bring, in your eyes, great leadership to the table? What made you go south?
Yeah, I think from that specific experience, I was already coming from a unit that I had, won awards, the top Intel analyst of the year, right, at the unit level, the group level, the base level, right, like not to, I had a lot of experience. I was the go-to guy for a lot of the things that were happening in our operations group. I mean, you were there, right? So I'm not, correct me if I'm lying, right? But and then I went to this new unit, and this flight chief knew exactly who I was, had seen me out and about, and knew my work. And I don't know if it was just a personal vendetta, but that individual made it seem like they were just there to, they're waiting for their next assignment, right? And they didn't really care. And they were definitely an autocratic type leader, to where it was their way and they didn't want to listen to any outside feedback or anything. They didn't care to make it better. They were just their way and nothing else, right? And to where we would voice our opinions, and we go through that chain and we voice our opinions of, hey, we believe we can make it better this way. We believe we can make it better this way. And just didn't care, didn't care at all, and didn't try to. And
Yeah, and what I've seen, and this is just me from the outside looking in, even with that specific situation with you, was I believe it's not so much a character flaw within these people, but it's the fact of, again, and we're talking about the military structure, there's airmen or there's the enlisted group, and then there's the officer group, right? Any type of officer, they have to, invest time into schooling. They have to have a degree in order to become a commissioned officer. And so they put all this time in the education field, and then they turn around where they're automatically put in a leadership position to manage a bunch of enlisted folks where, we didn't have, our entry was not a degree, so we could come in, but we definitely had experience, right? But they're not taught actual leadership principles. And that's what's seen within so many industries, so many organizations these days. Again, it's not a character flaw. It's the investment is not there of what it looks like to actually lead these people at a high level. What? We're not taught how to have tough conversations. We're not taught how to come in, pour into your team, give them the expectations coming out the gate, setting a standard of what you want your culture to actually be. The follow-up of if people are not meeting the standard, right? There's no vision. There's really the lack of all of these fundamental principles. There's really nothing there. It's that flow as you go mentality, right? It's like, we're just going to go, we're just going to job it, and we'll tackle things along the way. And then, the frontline employees or not the managers, but the frontline employees or the enlisted folk, or, we're sitting here like, I don't even really know what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, I know my job, but I don't really know what the standard is. I don't know what the expectation is. And then we're playing the guessing game. Right. And then sometimes they're getting upset with us, but we don't even really know what their expectations are. And then it's a rift between the two, and that's quickly a slippery slope. Right. It becomes a battle between the two.
Yeah. So yes, but I also think it was a character flaw as well, because when you are so distraught and focused on your own career projection, that ultimately turns into, the byproduct is it being a character flaw, because that character flaw is selfishness, right? You're only caring about you in the projection in which you go, rather than, again, it's bass backwards, right? If you focus on other people, you actually are able to have a higher ceiling for yourself, because just like you said before, the greatest testament of leadership is how your team is doing, not about you. But when you focus on you, your team takes a hit. And then now you don't even have buy-in. You don't even have culture. Now all the great people are now just jobbing it, showing up and doing the job so they don't get in trouble. And you completely destroyed everything else. So, and the byproduct, unfortunately, is a character flaw. And it's not a hit on this person, right? It's just, you don't know what you don't know. And, I pray that person is at a good place and, learned or was even aware. But if you're not aware, you can't change.
So let me ask you this, man, based off of everything that you just said, not being a character flaw, or is it a character flaw? And, that really doesn't matter at the end of the day. But let me ask you this. You said lack of awareness. Pretty much all of this stemmed from lack of awareness. If you don't know, you don't know. Well, who's to say that if they were properly, adequately trained on how to lead a team and they understood the pitfalls on the front end of if they acted in this manner or if they led in this type of way, these are the potential outcomes that could take place, would they still lead that same way? You know what I mean? If they came in and they had a whole course or an actual class of like, hey, be careful, if you lead in this manner, XYZ can happen, and that awareness was actually there, would they have that character flaw?
I mean, that's a great question. But when it comes to leaders across the board, there's always going to be people with those character flaws, right? No matter how many courses they take, there's certain individuals that just, treat it very much like a job. Not saying that this person did or didn't, if they did or did have that training, but no matter where you're at, because people are people. You're going to have your good people, your stellar people, your people that just show up, your people that really don't give a crap. And especially in the military, how you get promoted, especially in the officer rankings, is based upon time and grade, right? Oh, you're an 02 for this long. Now you're an 01. After an 01, you're a captain. Well, guess what? Now that's that leadership role. So you're forced into a leadership position, whether you even give a crap or not. You're now that. And now your goal as a captain is to make it to major, because it's all a time-based thing. And so training obviously would have helped. Training is always going to help. But the implementation of that training is up to the individual. And that's what is going to expose those character flaws, right?
Oh, it is. But now take a step back. Where I'm truly coming from is the matter of fact of a lot of these individuals, and that's where it's kind of the structure of that gets a little, there's a lot of gray area. So what I mean by that is, so you were NCO, like you said, you were a non-commissioned officer. So once that leader came in, how much time had you been serving in the military already? Like, what was your rank? How much time have you been in? How much real world experience had you had up until that point? Just a quick question.
Yeah, 5 years.
Of real world experience, of actual operations.
As a non-commissioned officer,
yeah.
I was previously the chief of intelligence operations for a unit where I was leading 15 people.
Yeah. So when it comes to that, you had 5 years of real world experience. And then we have a young lieutenant who spent the last 4 years.
This was a captain.
Captain. Yeah. So you had a captain come in. Well, I'm talking more lieutenants at this point, but even young captains, right? Maybe that, because when a captain comes in, that's the first time they're thrust in that type of leadership role where now you're a flight chief, you're a section chief. You haven't led a whole section before, right? You've spent the majority of your career up into this point in the education realm with lack of real world actionable experience. You weren't invested in when it comes to leadership. You were invested in what it takes to be a high-level intel analyst, you know what I mean? And so now, obviously, you're thrusted into a leadership position with no type of adequate training on that, with only a job skill set, and you have to figure it out on your own. And that right there, I lead into that because that's where I'm saying maybe it's a character flaw. I feel like the true tall tale sign is that, like, let me see where you're at 3 assignments later. Not that very first assignment. The very first assignment, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt because you were thrusted into that position to be a positional leader, right? But if you don't learn from your mistakes, if you didn't see those pitfalls, if you didn't try to pivot and then grow yourself, and then coming into the next assignment, you get a clean slate, how are you leading your folks then with the now real world experience? That exposes, is it a character flaw or is it a training flaw? But too many times it's more so the training flaw, and that's why we see this as a wide open market of where we're coming in today, is because we've been talking about the military a whole lot right now, but the largest leadership gap, why I say it's between frontline employees and new supervisory roles or middle management, is because these are the individuals that they usually get promoted into these leadership roles because they were great at their job. Yeah. They had some great character aspects where their leadership felt enough where they would be a great leader. They are SMEs, subject matter experts in their realm, in their field. Let's take them to the next level. But that has nothing to do with leadership. Just because you're good at a job or because you have a great skill set at a specific endeavor does not mean that it's synonymous with leadership. And so I say that to say that now you go from a frontline employee great at your job, now you're thrusted into a brand new leadership role, not with adequate training on what it actually means to become a great leader.
Yeah.
And then now you're leading 4, 5, 6, maybe 10 people, and you're just learning on the fly.
Right. So let's dive into this a little bit more. Let me go ahead and ask you a question about leadership, right? Because a lot of times when people get promoted, just like you were talking about, most people get promoted because they're good at their job, rather than actually being prepared as a leader, right? How would you feel, and I'm sure maybe we've experienced this in the past, of somebody that was a coworker of yours, you guys were gunning towards, that next promotion, they get promoted, they might have been mediocre at their job, but their boss saw them as that next potential leader. How would you feel if you were, a stud at your position? What would that do for you as somebody that's gunning for that position?
Well, I mean, at that level, you got to understand what comes with that territory, right? You have to understand what you signed up for from the beginning. And, that's what's hard about the corporate life in general. You have so many people that are gunning for one open spot.
Yeah.
Everybody's waiting for that person to retire, to get promoted, to quit, so that position now opens up. And it's like, I'm gunning, I'm competing for that job, right? And then so many people are elevated, or no, not necessarily elevated. Everybody's gunning for that. And then it's on the leadership to fill that position with one of those people. Now, obviously, the vision of those top leaders can be tainted sometimes because they're not on the front lines with these employees. So sometimes the peers of that individual that gets promoted can have a whole different mindset, because it's like, I've been with this person on the day-to-day. I know the conversations that are happening behind the scenes. I know the front that they put on when leadership is around. So right. You can always feel some type of way, but you have to understand going into it that that's actually the game. Right? You have to understand that sometimes you have to play the game in order to put yourself in there.
Exactly, yeah.
And so, but what I feel is, is there certain instances where you can kind of become salty, like that person is not necessarily deserving of that position. I was more deserving of that position, but I feel like everybody will feel about that with themselves, even with the lack of awareness of what they truly actually bring to the table.
Right. Yeah. Well, I asked that question because I see it so often in most industries, right? You have, a stud that is good at their job, but also prepared for leadership or has previous experiences, maybe at something else or another role, and they don't get that promotion. And I see so many almost career paths get completely changed because they don't know how to respond to that failure. And now they're like, well, this guy, sucked at his job, but now he's leading me. And they always feel majority of the time they feel a type of way about it. But I think it's the responsibility of that leader who does promote or takes that position of hey, don't let that taint you. Keep on doing a good job. Keep on grinding to that next spot, because it's going to come in time. And I feel like leaders watch how you respond when you don't get that position that you're gunning for.
Yeah. And so that's like a black hole, right? Everything that you're talking about right now, in my opinion, is kind of that black hole area where it's so hard to be able to fill those positions accordingly. Because as a higher level leader, sometimes you are going to flop.
Yeah.
It's like so here we are, draft night of the NFL. It's draft night 1. Everybody's gunning for the top players. Sometimes that number 1 player was the number 1 college player, the projected number 1 overall draft pick, and they get in the league and they completely flop. And the general manager's sitting here like, well, that was a flop. Everything told me that they would pan out and be the next great leader on our team, but it completely went sideways. You know what I mean? So sometimes it's hard to be able to project what that actually looks like. But that gray area in which you're talking about, I feel that's the lack. That's where the area is non-existent in today's society, is where we don't have leaders that are grooming people when they have failure points. We don't have the leaders that are bringing the best of people, the best out of people under them. We're not having those conversations. You know what I mean? We're not pulling our people aside like, hey, let's clear the air right here. I know there's a big fat elephant in the room that nobody's talking about. That position got filled. I know that was kind of a letdown for you, but let's not stop. Don't let it have you go backwards. We're going to work even harder now. I'm going to take you even more so under the ring. Let's take the attributes that potentially got that person in that position, but still being your authentic self. But let's grow your voice. Like, what was it? Seek feedback. What was it that potentially did not get you that spot? And let's go to work in those areas.
Right.
Here's the potential blind spots that I see. I'm telling you not to upset you. I'm telling you not to come down on you or think that I'm coming after you. I'm telling you because I want you to elevate. I don't think you have the biggest of voices right now. I don't think, you're great at what you do, but it's not showcased enough. I feel like there's maybe a little bit of a lack of confidence, and we need to showcase your skill set. So let's work on that moving forward. Yeah. Next time there's a staff meeting coming up, I want you to speak up a little bit. Don't sit here and try to outshine everybody. Nobody likes that, but pick and choose certain situations where you can showcase your confidence, where you can showcase your talent. And it's like, people at the round table, especially when it comes to leadership, they're like, holy crap, I've never seen that, that employee right there talk. And they're over here bringing great opinions to the table. Right. It's like, I didn't even know that was in there.
Right. And this goes back to, I think, one of our previous conversations of having the tough conversations with your people. And it's so important because it provides that necessary feedback to let them know, hey, these are the things I would tweak, or hey, you're on point. I remember when I had an interview for a special operations unit as an intel guy, going in, doing a week-long interview process, went through the ringer, and we ended up getting put up on a board, and it was everybody in the unit from, officer ranks to high enlisted ranks. And there was a board, and based upon how we did in that week-long interview, we got the position or we didn't. They selected two people, or were going in to select two individuals, and there was like 7 of us that were there. And so one at a time we go in this room, and I remember, going into the room, you got the board of people, all in, their military ABUs, and you're sitting at attention, and it can be intimidating because all you see is this, major captain, right? Yeah. Master sergeant, senior master sergeant, and you're there, and they're giving you feedback on that. And for me, ultimately, they're like, hey, these are the things, your failure points, whatever. You didn't get the position. However, one of the biggest reasons why you didn't get the position is not because you weren't capable of it. You just didn't have the leadership experience. And at the time, I was an E3. I was an A1C going into, that type of role. And so they say, hey, come back, in a year and a half, whenever you have that leadership experience, based off of everything else, we would give you the job. And so, I didn't get the job, but I left knowing exactly what I needed to do, and it had nothing to do with my capabilities. It had everything to do with the lack of opportunities I had, which I couldn't control, and therefore I wasn't, down on myself or upset that, oh my gosh, I didn't get this position. I knew exactly what I needed to improve on, or the opportunities I needed to take advantage of.
Yeah. And so what you're saying there is a perfect example of the marketplace and why I feel like there is such a large gap, because we're talking about there's the lack of the hard conversations.
Bring it all together,
there's the lack of those, leaders that are pulling their people through the adversities in life. But where we come in and what we're talking about is, I believe it's because these young leaders are not adequately trained on how to have these hard conversations. I wouldn't even say
just young. I would just say as a whole.
Well, when I say young, I don't mean as in young as in age. I mean a newer leader within a newer leadership role.
That's when I say young leaders. Experienced leaders, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But that trickles down. Is because this needs to be talked about and trained, nip it in the butt right away. As soon as you excel into a leadership role, that's where we're coming in, because this training and teaching and mentorship, this needs to happen at the beginning. Therefore, later in their career, it trickles down and it trickles down and it trickles down. But if you never had that, of course, our experienced leaders, both of those work the same. It's either the lack of compounds or the success compounds, either way. But that's why we feel it's the market and such a responsibility to come in and provide this type of training for younger leaders, newer supervisors, newer people that are in these leadership roles, because this is what's actually needed for the employee force, is these hard conversations, is this grooming, And what's so cool is this week, what we did was we took it upon ourselves, like, hey, this is how we feel. We feel that these gaps are in, leadership right now, that this isn't what's being talked about. The newer leaders aren't able to have tough conversations. The newer leaders aren't able to properly set the expectations and the standard of which they want their teams to perform. When somebody is not operating at that standard, these leaders do not know how to pull them aside and, explain the fact that they're not meeting the standard. They're not able to actually redirect. All these fundamental principles that are necessary for a leader to lead their teams is not had because the capability is there, but they don't know how to actually go about it, and so we got on LinkedIn into a handful of leadership groups, and I just posted that simple question in all of these groups. I said, what do you currently feel is the largest leadership gap when it comes to frontline employees in new supervisory roles / managers? And these are the things that people brought up. And LinkedIn is great because it's people all over the world. We had, corporate people from India. We had entrepreneurs, we had, people from Africa, whatever the case may be, but they all spoke the same exact language. They said, it's hard because nobody's setting the expectations. Nobody is having the hard conversations. Nobody is taking people under their wing to teach them these minute things. And that's what
doing the trainings.
Nobody's doing the trainings. And that was synonymous across the world, across so many different industries.
Wait, they were across the world and they were speaking the same language?
Dude, language of lack of leadership.
Come on.
And so that's why that marketplace was for us. Like, hey, let's get into this realm right here. We need to bring back the skill set of leading people at the very beginning. We need to teach young leaders, new leaders in leadership positions exactly these gaps that we're talking about. We need to, as soon as you come in a supervisory role, we need to teach you exactly what it looks like to set the standard. Right? Like I said last episode, be the current CEO of your position. You might not be the CEO of your company, but you have to be the CEO of your position. You could be a supervisor and you only have 2 to 3 direct reports, where I'm the CEO of these direct reports. I'm the CEO of my section. As soon as I get a new employee that come in as a new hire, or somebody that's already been there, maybe I'm new to my section, or maybe I was one of their peers, we were equals, but I got promoted into this new leadership. The first thing that we need to do is sit down one-on-one, have a heartfelt conversation, and cast vision of what I ultimately want the next 6 months to a year to this whole section, what I want that to look like.
Expectations and vision.
Expectation management and casting the overall vision. Hey, this is how we're going to operate. This is how this section is going to, operate as a whole. This is how we need to operate. This is why we need to do it. Explaining the why is more important than anything.
Huge.
The why is so lost these days. You know what I mean?
Focus on the what.
The what
and the how.
The what and the how, and not the why. And so the why, from a leader standpoint, the why is lost, but it's needed so much because the why is our superpower. If you explain the why, you can bring so many people with you because they know why they're doing what they're doing.
It allows the understanding of why you're doing what you're doing. There's been so many times I've been in a position, or I feel like people have, worked or go to their job and they're like, well, I'm doing this just because of my job, right? Like, I'm doing this just because I'm told to, but you don't understand why. Like, what is the overall effect of you showing up every single day? I feel like most people don't know why. They don't do that. Why. Like, oh yeah, this is just my position. I'm a quality analyst for an insurance company. Yeah, but why are you doing that? I get paid to do it. But like, that should not be the answer of your team if you are a leader. It's like, because you get paid. Well, yeah.
And if you're the leader, it's your responsibility to understand and dissect that why. You need to take the core values of what the organization has, right? You're the one that's in the staff meetings with the higher level executives, right? You're in the staff meetings with what that vision comes from the higher level leadership.
Exactly, yeah.
If you don't trickle that down to your people, they're not in those meetings.
Right.
It's your responsibility. You need to take that higher vision and paint a picture to your people. You need to take the complex ideology from that company and your C-level executives and break it down to an easier level picture to your team of like, hey, you might not feel it right now. Maybe you are working an entry-level job, but you are an intricate position and a cog with this whole opportunity.
Right.
When it came to the military, a non-commissioned officer, we were called the backbone of the military. And I believe frontline employees are the backbone of every corporations, man. They are the ones that are in the foxholes, the worker bees. And so they are the company.
Yes.
Hardly ever are they actually told that and given a pat on the back for that. Right. But that's where it's the leader's responsibility to step in and paint that picture for them. And that way, the more that you do that, when adversity arises, that's where you can reinforce that. Like, hey, I know we have a change right now. I know higher level leadership is doing this. I know that it may be uncomfortable. I know it even sucks right now. But I'm right here in the trenches with you as your leader, remind you of what part you actually play, why your position is actually so crucial, and the fact that we can do this together. I know how you're feeling, but I can empathize with you, come to your level, and then take you to higher ground.
Yeah. And when you remove the why and you just focus on the what and the how, that's then going to create frustration, because you're like, hey, I need you to do X, Y, Z. And then people go and do it and they start doing it and they're like, why the F am I doing X, Y, and Z? Like, what is the purpose of this? And then you start asking those questions. Like, don't worry about it. Just go ahead and do it. And then the employees start talking amongst each other, and they're like, dude, why are we doing this? But if you provide the why, like, hey, you are doing this because we need this to happen. And if you do this, this allows this to happen, right? I'm not trying to give any specific examples, but when you remove the why, frustration happens and you kill your culture from that.
Kill the culture, because like you said, that's a slippery slope where if you allow these cracks to take place and you allow these backdoor conversations to be had amongst the peers and they don't truly understand what's happening, they're going to paint their own picture. As a leader, you're going to paint the picture for your team, or your team is going to paint the picture for themselves. Yeah. And sometimes those pictures can be the complete opposite of each other. And then you get wind of it as leader and you're like, where the heck is that coming from, right?
You're like, dude, my team sucks. Yeah. Why are they so crusty?
Yeah, why are they salty? And it's like, well, dude, there's no wonder why they painted this picture, because that's their viewpoint. Right. They're given a certain scope. You can't expect them to see what you're purview to, because they're not in those conversations. They're not purview to the type of information that you're informed on. But if you don't trickle that down, if you don't rally the troops behind that cause, they're going to form their own opinion, good or bad. Hopefully it's good, because you've garnered enough respect as a leader that they're going to bring you into those conversations, and then you can quickly, divert those conversations and give them the why. But if you're just operating on a passive level, and you're not giving them that information, well, then that's going to stick, and it's going to grow, and it's going to grow, and it's going to grow. It takes a slither of a crack, man. Yeah. It takes a slither of a crack for one word to be had, and then that spreads like wildfire.
Yeah, you lose credibility as that leader.
As a leader, you lose credibility, and then obviously higher level leadership's coming down on you, like, why is your team not performing, right? But again, all this stems from young leaders don't know how to do this. We're not invested in, man.
No.
Because, again, we live in a world today, it's all about the bottom line, but I know everybody can attest to the fact that we're expected to do more with less. How many layoffs have there been across the board in every single industry? How many managers and supervisors are stressed out their gourds, because it's like, talk about wearing multiple hats of what we were talking about at the beginning of the podcast, not even entrepreneurs. There's supervisors and managers that are wearing multiple hats because of the company's foreshaping, and they're like, I need you to do more with less. Yeah. And so literally leaders these days, they don't even have the capacity to be able to invest into their people. They don't have the time, the adequate resources to be able to take the time to invest in their people, to groom them appropriately. They're stressed about doing their own job. They're stressed about losing their own job, right? And they can only focus on that typical 9-to-5 job duties, roles, and responsibilities that they're a part of, right? Unless you have the actual potential leaders that are few and far in between that take it upon themselves, like, I don't care what's going on around me, I've had the experience under my belt, I know how to rally my troops, I know how to do these things, then that's great opportunities for them. But the majority of people, especially people that don't have that experience, that are entrusted in those leadership positions for the first time, that don't know how to do these things, that's where that lack falls into place. and you don't have the time or capacity, right? And so that's where we're like, hey, let's jump into here. Let's provide courses. Let's, get into these organizations. Let's do the recon. Let's jump standard. Let's interview.
The new expectation for what it is for leaders across the board.
Yeah. Like, take a step back. Allow me to come in as an unbiased. I'm not part of your organization, but allow me to come in. I have the time. This is exactly what we do. This is our dedication. This is our passion. We care about leaders. We care about organizations. We care about people first and foremost. So don't even worry about finding the time. Allow us to come in and provide these trainings for people. We're going to come in and teach you how to have these conversations. We're going to come in and teach you how to have expectation management. We're going to come in and teach you how to set a proper standard.
How to develop the leaders.
How to develop the leaders.
Managers.
How to groom managers, up and coming managers. How to identify your up and coming leaders. The people that actually stand out. How to build and create and foster culture. How to actually do all these things from those front lines. And then that culture begins to take root. The seed is planted, it begins to take root, and then that builds, and then you start seeing productivity, you start seeing efficiency, you start seeing that take root and excel for the organization as a whole.
Yeah.
Again, everything compounds, whether it's good or bad.
Yeah.
It can compound backwards or it can compound forwards. But the point is that this is a huge marketplace that is such a big gap out there, man.
I know, man. You just mentioned everything, and I'm already getting excited just hearing those buzzwords, those leadership buzzwords, those development buzzwords, because, man, it's all about people. And I just love investing into people. I mean, you've been around me for the last 10 years. Everything that we do, at the heart of it is with people, for people. Right? Because like I said in the beginning, it's all about quality of life. So whether you're an entrepreneur and you want to go and create a better life, or you're a employee and you just want to have a good life, right? You want the American dream, either or, that leadership and that relationship is going to affect it in such a positive or such a negative way.
Exactly. And that's why I can't wait to get into these organizations and build relationships with these folks, right?
Right, yeah.
Not only are we just providing a service for these organizations, no, we're looking to embed ourselves in these organizations, to build relationships with, the higher level leadership that hopefully hires us on. But I want to be able to establish that relationship. Look, this is what we're trying to achieve. I see the value in it. We're going to lead your leaders, adequately train them, equip them to become great leaders. And then a month from now, we're going to come back and have that conversation with you, like, hey, what's going on with your organization? Like, do you see these changes? And then each time you come back, you're going to see a new spark. You're going to see new lifeblood. You're going to see some
hope in their eyes.
Yes, right? You're going to see the application from our trainings take place. Yeah. And that's what allows that passion to take place for us, man. There's nothing like seeing a new spark in someone's eyeballs, man.
Right. Did you ever see that show a long time ago called Bar Rescue, where the guy would go in and
John Taffer, dude.
yeah, John.
Shout out Jay, bro.
And he would go in and he'd go in and completely revamp just a horrible establishment, something that's going out of business. The employees are all jacked up. That's what we're here to do, right? Like,
exactly.
We're here to organizationally rescue you, right?
Yes.
Good organization, bad organization, right?
Yes.
We definitely want to be preemptive with these things.
Oh yeah.
And I think a lot of organizations do the best with what they can, but just like you were mentioning before, we're at an all-time of lack, right?
Exactly.
And so we're excited to be that John Taffer for the corporate America or whatever team or organization. Yeah. We might yell.
But I love it, man. Yeah, we might not. But dude, he might yell. But I've seen some conversations. I've seen some episodes where he, literally tears up at the end, man, when he sees the progress that is made.
Passionate about
because he's literally passionate about it. But that's the whole point of this podcast, is the fact of we just need to bring the conversation up.
Yeah.
Bring the awareness around this. I know that not everybody, but there's multiple people just by that LinkedIn data analysis that we did that feel the same type of way. But there has to be that break in point where it's talked about enough where it actually changes, right? Whether we're there in person providing these adequate trainings for people, but just these conversations alone where people can tune in here, find some value within what we're even talking about in this episode, find some application that they can take back to wherever they're at and begin that change there. That's why I love the media world that we live in today is that right there. We can already provide the great change of what we're talking about right now from a living room. We can bring the awareness, we can bring the conversation, we can bring the principles here and start making changes and become unified with this.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, man.
But yeah, man, so these are all great points. And exactly, again, just talking about the passion that we have and just excited. This is the starting point, man. Yeah. This is exactly the starting point, bringing awareness around these conversations. And that's what we're going to dive deeper and deeper into episode. Moving forward. Yeah. I mean, we truly feel this is our overall purpose.
Yeah, laying the foundation.
Laying the foundation, providing those foundational principles for up and coming leaders as we stand, and just provide this community. That's why we want the feedback. We want the, comment below. What the pitfalls do you see in your leadership? What's going on with your guys' organization, so that we can all come together and make that great change together.
Absolutely.
So, hey, this is where we'll wrap up here. I think it was a great starting point. We're excited to dive in further, and this is a never-ending journey, and it's a community. So, like we said, this is a revolution, because we're going to turn this whole leadership game on its head. We're going to get the leadership, the investments back into people, back into organizations, and yeah.
We'll see you episode 4.
Episode 4 coming up. Stay valued up.
Boom.